there's something that happens in families that doesn't always get talked about directly, but you feel it. There's usually one person who holds the whole thing together. Not officially, not in a way that anyone gave them a title and there were no meetings that said, okay, now you're in charge of keeping us connected. That's not what happened. It just became them. They're the ones who reaches out when things go quiet, who remembers what everyone else forgets, who notices the friction before it becomes a fight and quietly smooths it over before anyone else even knew it was an issue, who makes sure the holidays happen, who sends the message that starts the conversation no one else thought to start. They become the thread, the quiet architecture of the whole thing. And for a long time, it just feels like that is how the family works. Until one day, they're gone. And you expect grief. And grief is absolutely there. But what doesn't get talked about is what comes after that. Because it's not just the person you lost. It's the role they were carrying. And when that role disappears, everything around it starts to shift. Starts to shift in ways you didn't see coming. Conversations don't happen the same way. People who used to feel close start to feel distant. Some relations go quiet. Some straight up go sideways. And sometimes resentment starts to show up. Because everyone is grieving. But not everyone grieves the same way. And not everyone feels seen in their grief. Some people need space. Some people need connection. Some feel like no one really understands what they lost. Not just the person, but the version of themselves that existed around that person. The version that felt held, guided, known. And sometimes that grief turns into expectation. The expectation that others should respond in a certain way, show up in a certain way, feel it the way that you feel it. But everyone is carrying something different. And when that isn't recognized, misunderstanding grows. And then there's the part that's harder to say out loud. Some relationships weren't quite what we thought they were. Not because the love wasn't real, but because some of what felt like closeness was actually proximity. You were close because someone was pulling you close. You were connected because someone was doing the connecting. And when that person is gone, you start to realize that some of what you had with each other was actually with them. And that's not a failure. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's just the truth. And recognizing that, really recognizing that, is one of the most disorienting parts of this kind of loss. Because now you're not just grieving a person. You're grieving a version of the family that may have never been fully real without them in it. And you have to decide what to do with that. There's another layer too. The people who were most held by that person, most guided, most supported, most protected from the friction, often feel the shift the hardest. Not because they love them more, but because things that were once handled are no longer being handled. And now there's a space where something used to be. A call that doesn't come. A holiday that nobody coordinates. A conflict that no one steps in to soften. And that space can feel madly uncomfortable, unfamiliar, even overwhelming. And it's not because the family is broken. It's because the structure that the family relied on was always one person. And this is where families either drift or become intentional. Because without that hinge, nothing continues on its own anymore. The calls don't just happen. The gatherings don't just come together. The traditions just don't hold themselves. Someone has to choose it. And sometimes no one does. Not because no one cares, but because everyone is waiting for someone to step into a role that no one is ready to fill. And that waiting is when people start saying, we're just not as close as we used to be. And the truth is, you're being held together. And now you have to decide if you want to hold it together yourselves. That doesn't mean recreating what was, because you can't. And trying to will only make you feel the absence more. That piece is gone. And no amount of effort will pull it back exactly as it was. What you're building now is something different. It has to be something different. It might be smaller at first, quieter, more deliberate in a way that used to feel unnecessary. But there's something that can happen in that deliberateness if people are willing to show up for it. New ways of connecting. New traditions. Not replacements, just new. Maybe it's a conversation someone decides to start. A dinner that gets planned even when it's inconvenient. a phone call that happens because someone chose to make it happen. Nothing grand, just chosen. And over time, these chosen things become the new architecture. Not the same as it was, but real and yours. And that requires something many people aren't used to giving: intentional participation. Not waiting for someone else to go first. Not sitting back and noticing what's missing while quietly hoping someone else handles it. But asking, honestly asking, what part am I willing to play now? Not who should do this. Not why hasn't anyone done this. But what am I willing to do? Because if no one steps forward, things don't stay the same. They fade. Not always because people stopped loving each other, but because connection doesn't maintain itself. It doesn't. It never did. You just had someone doing the maintaining. So if the family matters to you, if the relationships matter to you, this is the moment. Not back to what it was, but to move forward into what you're willing to build. With the recognition that everyone is hurting in their own way. Everyone is adjusting in their own way. Some of what you thought was close before may need to be rebuilt from a more honest place. And that's okay. Honest is a foundation. Connection won't continue on memory alone. It has to be lived. Again, differently, on purpose. Sit with yourself there and continue traveling. If this feeling is where you are right now, the next step isn't fixing your life. It's understanding where you are. And that's where we begin.